This is John Moses Browning's model of 1911. Adopted on 29 March 1911 by the U.S. Army's Bureau of Ordnance, it is said that this was the first small arm to pass its military trials with a perfect score for reliability. This design served for 3/4 of a century as the standard sidearm of the entire United States military. Though officially replaced in the mid-1980s by the Italian-designed Beretta 9mm, the M1911 continues to serve around the world. The U.S. Marine Corps continues to purchase and issue specially built M1911 pistols for their special operations personnel. It has been copied, with and without license, in several nations, and has at least partly influenced the design of nearly every semi-automatic handgun in the world for the last 100 years. It is considered by many to be the greatest fighting handgun of all time. It is certainly the most combat-proven. This is my own 1911, one of the affordable Philippine copies now widely available. I bought this used some years ago and have made a few changes, but every part which matters should still be interchangeable with the original model of 1911 approved by the Bureau of Ordnance. Bearing that in mind, to begin, let's identify the controls and major features. The trigger, the manual safety, the slide stop, the magazine release, the magazine, the grip safety, the exposed hammer, the ejection port, and the front and rear sights. A member of the gun culture should know how to clear and make safe any firearm he or she may encounter, so next let's examine how to clear the weapon for safe handling. First, always keep the weapon pointed in a safe direction and fingers away from the trigger. Press the magazine release button on the left side of the frame. The box magazine should drop freely out of the magazine well. Not every pistol will drop every magazine smoothly, and some must be pulled out. Next, the slide must be withdrawn to eject any cartridge that may still be in the chamber. If the hammer is not cocked, the manual safety cannot be engaged. If the safety is engaged, it must be released to unlock the slide. If desired, the slide can be manually locked open at this point by pushing the slide stop lever up to engage its notch in the slide. For storage, after first confirming the chamber is empty and the magazine has been removed, the slide can be closed by pulling back on the slide to release the slide stop, or by pressing down on the slide stop. If the latter, it is recommended that you restrain the slide and ease it down rather than letting it slam forward. If the 1911 was fitted with a buffer on the recoil spring guide, the slide may not be able to travel back far enough to release the slide stop. With the slide closed, the hammer can then be lowered. A reasonable amount of dry firing should not harm any properly built 1911. You can simply aim the weapon in a safe direction and press the trigger. Or you can restrain the hammer with the thumb and lower it slowly. Never lower the hammer on a round in the chamber. Now let's look at basic loading and operation. The 1911 feeds from a single column detachable box magazine. There are double column versions, but the technique will be the same. Cartridges are loaded in the magazine in the obvious manner. Loading tools can be used, but are not strictly necessary for these large cartridges. The original capacity when adopted was 7 rounds. Most 1911s made today take 8 in a standard flush-seated magazine. Extended magazines are also available, the usual size being 10 rounds. Capacity will also increase if the weapon is chambered for a cartridge other than the original .45 ACP. With rounds now in the magazine may be inserted, again in the obvious way, into the magazine well. It should not be necessary to slam the magazine into the frame. Even when fully loaded, the magazine should seat and lock with only finger pressure. There will be variations between different manufacturers, of course. You can see, hear, and feel the magazine catch engaging. If you look closely on the right side of the frame, you can see the magazine catch here snapping into place as the magazine is fully seated. See that one more time. There. Next, As always, keeping the weapon in a safe direction and fingers away from the trigger, pull back on the slide as far as it will go, and in this instance, release it to fly forward under spring pressure. Do not ride the slide down when chambering a cartridge, as this may cause a misfeed. It is not advised to drop a cartridge into the chamber separately, as this may damage the extractor when closing the slide. You may need to build up some finger strength in order to do this. If you don't have the finger strength to pull the slide straight back in the traditional slingshot method, use the overhand method, again being careful not to let the muzzle cover anything, including part of yourself, that you don't want to destroy. Putting your hand over the top this way gives a better purchase for the finger and thumb. As soon as the first round is chambered, engage the manual safety unless you're going to fire immediately. The manual safety disengages the trigger from the sear and locks the slide closed. At this point, the weapon will be ready to fire. The hammer will have been moved to the full cock position by the slide, and after chambering the first round, the thumb safety will be off and the slide unlocked. For normal carry, the method recommended by Jeff Cooper is Condition 1, with a fully loaded weapon, a round in the chamber, the hammer at full cock, and the manual safety engaged. This last is obviously done by moving the safety lever up into its own notch in the slide. The weapon can then be holstered and carried depending on the environment. At a match, for example, you would carry an empty holstered weapon with hammer down, never loading the weapon until directed to do so by the range officer, while for defensive carry the weapon may remain in this condition for days at a time. To fire the weapon, after drawing and aiming, simply wipe the thumb down across the safety lever in an intuitive motion, place your finger on the trigger, and squeeze in the normal fashion. The M1911 uses normal semi-automatic operation, meaning it fires one round each time the trigger is pressed, extracting and ejecting the spent case, recocking the hammer, and guiding a new cartridge into the chamber. This continues until all ammunition is spent, at which time the slide will lock back on an empty magazine. To reload, first eject the empty magazine by pressing the magazine release button. Then insert the next magazine and release the slide in your preferred fashion. The weapon is then ready to fire again. This should cover the basic operation of the M1911 pistol and its many variations. You will find that most of these operations are similar for most modern semi-automatic pistols. Some will have a different shape of safety lever, it will be in a different place, moving in a different direction. Many will have double action triggers. But to unload and reload the weapon, these operations will be largely identical.